Our meeting seemed like a scene out of a romantic comedy, unfolding at a friend's barbecue, where a mishap with spilled drinks led to our first awkward conversation. Logan was irresistibly charming, his humor catching me off guard, and soon, laughter became the backdrop of our blossoming relationship. Before long, we were inseparable, our connection so natural it seemed predestined. Our wedding was a dream come true, simple but deeply heartfelt, celebrated with close friends and family. Logan, whose career in finance was rapidly advancing, suggested a prenuptial agreement due to our different financial situations, a practical decision that didn't bother me. My love for him was grounded in feelings, not finances. However, his mother, Margot, was less easy to win over. Her cold demeanor stood in stark contrast to the warmth Logan and I shared, but I was too enamored with our lives to let her skepticism dim my happiness. Even the devastating discovery of Logan's infertility didn't shake my devotion. Instead, it deepened. I poured my heart into turning our house into a warm, loving home, using my savings to buy furniture and appliances. As time passed, however, the initial warmth faded, replaced by a growing coldness I couldn't ignore. Logan's demands increased, his once tender requests now sharp commands. "Make sure breakfast is on the table before I leave, Eliza," he would say, his voice stripped of the warmth it once held. Despite my demanding job at the Department of Health and Human Services, I adhered to his expectations, always striving to prepare fresh, elaborate dinners in the hope of rekindling the love we once shared. But my efforts were overlooked, taken for granted without a single word of gratitude. Conversations that once sparkled with shared dreams turned into verbal battles, his words slicing deeper each time. "This is my house, Eliza," he would snap, diminishing my contributions and presence. Each day, as I cared for our home, the reality of our crumbling relationship became clearer. The idea of being alone, once unthinkable, began to seem like a refuge. One quiet evening, the realization hit me profoundly. The man I married had become a stranger, and the love that once guided me had dimmed into a longing for a life where I was appreciated and valued. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, the silence of our house echoed the vast distance between us. Alone with my thoughts, I wondered if I might be better off by myself. This wasn't a question I could answer yet, but it lingered in the darkness, a whisper of what might be necessary. With each day, the whisper in my heart grew louder, urging me to rediscover who I was and reclaim the happiness I deserved. Living with Logan had become like living with a stranger, not the man I had once joyfully married. He found fault in everything. The house wasn't immaculate, the dinners too monotonous. No matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. In search of solace, I'd wander alone through malls, buying new furniture and gadgets for our home, trying to fill the growing void with material things. Yet, the fleeting joy these purchases brought vanished the moment I returned to his indifference. It was a harsh realization when I noticed that Logan hadn't contributed a dime to our joint account for months. The burden of our expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, had all been falling on my paycheck. One evening, I mustered the courage to address this imbalance. I approached him as he lounged in his armchair, his attention glued to the TV. "Logan, we need to talk about the finances. You haven't added anything to the joint account in months, and I've been covering it all," I said, my voice steady, hoping for some acknowledgement or an apology. He barely looked at me, his eyes still fixed on the television. "It's my house. You're just living in it. Why should I pay for your upkeep?" he retorted, his words cutting deep. I was stunned. "Your upkeep, Logan? I'm your wife, not some tenant. I've been paying for everything, trying to make this a home for us both," I argued, my anger rising. He scoffed dismissively, a sound that chilled me. "Eliza, you're making a big deal out of nothing. If you don't like it, maybe you should just leave." "But we both know you've got nowhere to go," he said, turning back to his show. I was boiling with hurt and anger, but before I could say more, his phone rang. It was his mother, Margot, and he answered on speaker. Before I could slip away, she chimed in. "Eliza, You need to stop this nonsense and start showing some gratitude. Logan's been too good to you, and here you are, acting like a freeloader."
Her words struck me like a slap.
Shocked, I managed to snatch the phone and hang up. "I can't believe you and your mother are calling me a freeloader in my own home," I said, my voice quivering with emotion. Logan just shrugged, unmoved. Well, if the shoe fits. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt more isolated than ever. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind, now more persistent. But where would I go? I had no apartment and no savings of my own. I felt trapped in a life that was no longer mine, married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a burden. The next morning, I awoke to an empty bed and a heavy heart. As I moved silently through the house, every room echoed with the remnants of our fight. I knew I needed a change, but the fear of starting over was paralyzing. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, I faced a tough decision. Do I stay in this loveless marriage, playing the role of the grateful freeloader, or do I take a leap into the unknown, hoping to find my footing? The answer was still unclear, but the call for change was undeniable. I realized I couldn't continue living this way. The tipping point had arrived, and it was time for me to choose my path forward. That day at work felt endless, a string of meetings with no break in sight. Glancing at the clock, I knew Logan would be irate. Under my breath, I muttered about my misfortune as I reached for my phone to give him a heads up. The moment he answered, his anger erupted through the speaker, loud enough for my whole office to overhear, making my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "This is your problem, Eliza. You should have been home cooking dinner, not wasting time at work," he bellowed. I quickly ended the call, shrinking away from the curious gazes of my colleagues. By the time I arrived home, it was far past our usual dinner time. The house was dark and eerily silent, but as soon as I stepped inside, Logan unleashed his fury like a storm. "Where have you been? A good wife would have dinner ready. What are you even good for?" His harsh words felt like daggers, slicing through my last shred of patience. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I responded, "Logan, I had to work. You know this project is important," but it was like speaking to a brick wall. "A bad wife and a terrible hostess. That's what you are," he shouted, his voice hitting a pitch I had never heard before. Suddenly, he declared, "You know what? I've had enough. Pack your things and get out of my house." I stood there, stunned, as he thrust divorce papers into my hands. "You'll be homeless without me," he sneered with a cruel laugh. Something inside me snapped. All the years I had spent bending backward for him, trying to be the perfect wife, evaporated. "Living in a shelter would be better than enduring one more day with you," I retorted, my voice more stable than I felt. Without another word, I signed the divorce papers. I packed my belongings into a suitcase, the gravity of my decision dawning on me as I looked around what used to be our house. It no longer felt like a home. It was merely a shell filled with broken promises and shattered dreams. I booked a room at a nearby hotel, seeking refuge from the turmoil. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, I realized it was the first night in years I didn't have to worry about Logan's dinner preferences or whether the house met his exacting standards. It was just me, and oddly, it felt liberating. Leaving was difficult, perhaps the hardest decision I'd ever made, but as I drifted to sleep, a part of me was excited about what the future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of my destiny, no longer bound to someone who diminished my worth. After settling into the hotel, reality began to sink in. It wasn't long before I received a call from Margot, Logan's mother. Her voice was tinged with a gloating tone. "Eliza dear, I just heard the wonderful news. My boy has finally come to his senses and divorced you. I'm celebrating tonight." Her words, intended to hurt, barely made an impact. I was beyond caring what Margot thought. "Time will tell, Margot," I replied calmly, a newfound sense of detachment washing over me. I hung up, a small smile playing on my lips. For the first time in years, her sharp words couldn't touch me. A week of navigating my new reality had passed, and despite the challenges, I was ready to face them head-on. When I finally opened up to my boss about the overwhelming pressure, I was feeling from pretending everything in my life was okay. I was carrying a heavy burden alone. I hoped for some sympathy or understanding from her, and her response became a lifeline I hadn't expected. "Eliza, I'm sorry to hear you're going through all this. There might be something that can help," she said, her voice transitioning from compassionate to professional. She informed me about a municipal housing program designed to assist individuals in tough situations like mine. It offered affordable housing options for those in need. "I think you should apply, and I'll help you." She offered her words a beacon of hope in the darkness that had engulfed my life. With her help, I applied for the program and, to my surprise, was accepted. The relief I felt was instantaneous. I could breathe again. Now, I am renting a small, modest apartment that is all mine. It's quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the tumultuous life I had left behind. No more tiptoeing around in the mornings, no ungrateful husband to appease. It's just me, and it feels incredibly liberating. Sitting in my new living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, I reflected on the journey that brought me here. It's been tough, with moments of doubt and fear, but also filled with unexpected acts of kindness and newfound strength. For the first time in a long while, I am excited about the future. I have a blank canvas in front of me, and I'm eager to start painting a new life, one where my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It's a fresh start, and I'm fully committed to embracing whatever this next chapter brings. It had been a few peaceful months since I started over, enjoying the simplicity of my new routines. Then, one quiet afternoon, my phone erupted into a loud series of rings, breaking the calm. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in ages, Margot, my ex-mother-in-law.
My heart sank.
Bracing myself, I answered, "Hello?" "Eliza, you need to come back to Logan this instant." Margot's voice screeched so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I sighed. "Margot, why would I do that?" The question was rhetorical, more for myself than for her. "Because he's in trouble. That fool son of mine bought shares years ago, took out loans, and now he's buried in debt. It's a disaster, and you need to help him sort it out," she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, not out of amusement, but sheer disbelief. "Help him, Margot? Do you remember the prenup? The one Logan insisted on? It clearly states that I am not responsible for his debts. And let's not forget, we're divorced. His financial mess is not my problem," I replied, my patience thinning. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you, you're just going to abandon him?" Her tone was accusatory, as if I had committed a terrible sin. "Everything you've done? Margot, let's be clear. The only thing you and Logan ever did was make my life miserable. And as for abandoning him, remember he kicked me out. He made it clear I was no longer welcome in his life or his house," I retorted. "You'll regret this, Eliza. You think you're better off without him, but you're making a huge mistake," she spat out, her voice venomous. I took a deep breath, finding a calm I didn't know I had. "Margot, I've spent too much of my life living in regret and fear. I'm finally finding peace, and I intend to keep it that way. After reaching my limit with Logan and his endless debts, which were entirely his creation, I realized it was time for him to face his troubles. I decided to step away and start anew. Concluding my conversation with Margot, I felt an unexpected closure. Contrary to what I anticipated, the emotions of guilt or distress didn't flood in. Rather, a liberating sense of relief washed over me. Asserting myself against Margot, I had declared my exit from their convoluted family disputes. It felt as though I was shedding an oppressive burden that I had carried far too long. After ending the call, I took a moment to sit and breathe deeply, a sigh I didn't even realize I had been holding back. That challenging exchange served as a poignant reminder of my journey towards personal independence and peace, a state I was determined to maintain, immune to any manipulative guilt-tripping. For the first time in a long while, I experienced a true sense of freedom from the relentless demands and critiques, from the perpetual cycle of attempting to appease those who never valued me. I had discovered my strength and my voice, and I was resolute in never letting anyone undermine that again. Looking around my modest apartment, I was enveloped by a sense of accomplishment. This was my haven, my fresh beginning. I had navigated through tumultuous times, emerging stronger each time, confident that no unexpected phone call could sway my newfound stability. The following morning, I awoke with a clear and firm determination. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sifted through my documents, locating receipts for every significant purchase made during my years with Logan: the state-of-the-art dishwasher, the washing machine we selected together, though financed solely by me, and the premium coffee machine that had become central to his mornings. My actions were not just about retrieving financial investments, but about affirming my worth and contributions, refusing to let them be dismissed or overlooked. With the assistance of a moving truck and several helpers, I returned to what once felt like home, now just a hollow shell. The quietness of the place stood in stark contrast to the emotional chaos within me. As the movers began to remove the items, a mix of satisfaction and melancholy swept through me. Each piece held memories, but I knew that holding onto the past would only impede my progress. As we wrapped up, Logan's call came through, as inevitable as it was unwelcome. He skipped any form of greeting, immediately questioning, "Where is all my stuff?" I couldn't help but respond with a knowing chuckle. "You mean the items I purchased with my money? I've reclaimed them, Logan. It's my right." His response was a barrage of anger and insults, which once might have intimidated me. But I was no longer that person. "Logan," I said firmly, cutting through his tirade, "I genuinely wish you well, but our paths are parting for good." With that, I ended the call and blocked his number, a definitive action to cut the last tie to a past that no longer served my interests. As the truck pulled away, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. This moment was not just about reclaiming my belongings, it was about reclaiming my life and independence. Reclaiming my self-worth was a journey, and I knew there would be challenges, but for the first time in a long while, I felt equipped and ready to tackle them on my terms. 7 months down the road, life had transformed in ways I hardly dared to imagine. I had secured a cozy apartment in a charming part of town, all thanks to a social housing program my boss had mentioned. The arrangement was perfect, a manageable down payment followed by small, stretched-out installments. For the first time, I wasn't just making ends meet. I had some financial breathing room to indulge myself without having to consider anyone else's needs. The day I received the keys to my apartment was unforgettable. I stepped through the door, overwhelmed by a sense of ownership. The apartment was a blank canvas, and for the first time in years, I was free to design my life without any compromises or sacrifices. I bought some paints and canvases, reconnecting with the girl I once was, the one who delighted in the simple joy of painting lost in her creative flow. I even dared to paint a self-portrait, seeing myself in a new light, a woman who had weathered many storms and emerged stronger, a woman who defined her worth. It felt like I was truly seeing myself for the first time, beautiful, self-reliant, and yes, a little selfish, but in the healthiest way possible. Then there was Max, my scruffy little dog with eyes too big for his face, but a heart to match. Adopting him felt like the final piece of my new life falling into place. Together, we became a duo, making the apartment feel truly like home. One evening, as Max and I curled up on the couch, I received a text from an old friend I hadn't seen since my tumultuous divorce. "Heard you're doing well. Coffee sometime." I replied with a smile. "Yeah, life's good. Coffee sounds great. My place. I've got some art to show off." Her response came quickly. "Look at you. All artsy and independent. Can't wait to see it and meet Max." Laughing, I set the phone down and looked around my little sanctuary. It's funny how life unfolds. I once thought I needed a husband, a big house, and a certain lifestyle to be happy. Now, here I was in a modest apartment with my dog and my art, feeling more fulfilled than ever. "We're doing just fine on our own, aren't we, Max?" I asked, scratching behind his ears. He barked in agreement, and I laughed, overwhelmed with gratitude for my independence, the tough journey that led me here, and the simple joys that filled my days. This was happiness, unfiltered and pure, and it was all mine. Life had taken such a surprising turn that even a headline I stumbled upon recently left me shocked yet strangely satisfied. My ex, Logan, had been declared bankrupt. The house he once kicked me out of had been sold to cover his debts. Now, he was back living with his mom, Margot. Despite everything, I couldn't suppress a small, satisfied smile. Breaking free from him was undoubtedly the best decision I ever made. Now, my mornings are spent walking Max to the park, enjoying the fresh air and peaceful quiet, a stark contrast to the tense, stifling atmosphere of my past life. Life has a way of bringing new passions just when you need them most, and for me, it was painting that breathed new energy into my world. On a whim, I joined the local amateur artists club, thinking it would be a casual hobby. But it quickly evolved into something much more significant. I found myself immersed in the world of colors and canvas, and soon I was showcasing my work at local exhibitions. My paintings, vibrant with bold strokes, became a reflection of my newfound freedom and joy. At one of these exhibitions, an unexpected encounter took place. I was standing next to a watercolor piece I was particularly proud of when a man approached. He studied the painting intently, then turned to me and commented, "That's quite beautiful." His appreciation made me smile, and I proudly responded, "Yeah, I did. Thank you." We struck up a conversation and discovered we had much in common. Before long, we found ourselves at a nearby cafe, sipping coffee and chatting like old friends. He had a warmth and sense of humor that I had long missed in my interactions with others. To my surprise, he purchased the painting, saying, "I want to see this first thing every morning. It's inspiring." That initial coffee led to dinner a few days later, and then regular walks in the park with Max, my dog, trotting alongside us. He introduced me to his 3 children, bright and welcoming, who embraced me with open arms and laughter. Everything felt natural and easy, like a piece of my life was falling into place that I hadn't even realized was missing. One quiet evening, after the kids had gone to bed and we were relaxing on his porch, he shared, "You know, I'm really glad I bought that painting." In the soft twilight, his voice was gentle. I leaned my head on his shoulder, smiling, and replied, "Me too. It's funny how things work out." Reflecting on my journey, from feeling trapped and hopeless in a stifling marriage to now standing on the threshold of something beautiful and new, I felt liberated from the shadows of my past. I was ready to dive into whatever the future held, embracing it with an open heart. As Max and I continued our morning walks, I often pondered the path that led me here. The pain and struggle were real, but they guided me to a place of peace and potential. I was open to embracing whatever came next, free from the past and ready for a new chapter. Walking under the sunlit trees, a sense of gratitude washed over me for every twist and turn that brought me to this moment. Ready to step forward, I moved into the light, eager to see what life had in store next.